set forth what your governance is and how specific things work. And of course, this is not that. It's very helpful. And so that was my recommendation, was that all of these first pages 3 through 5 be included in your report, but not in the body of the charter itself.
So would you say that in the preliminary report or the final report?
I think it should be in the final. You can put it in the preliminary report, absolutely, but I think you should have it in the final report.
Yeah, okay.
The final report really becomes the legislative document that people are going to be looking at. If they say, well, we're not quite sure what they meant by that, because you're going to be explaining some of the proposals in that final commission report. And if there's a minority report, then people can compare and contrast. But it's very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So I would recommend that you put it in that, and in either or both the preliminary, but certainly it should be in the final one.
Very good. So we're on to page Article 1, random powers.
That was, I didn't have any comments
Yep,
on that one.
2.1, we moved down to the page 2.1.2.
Yes. The only thing I did there was renumber it, because the way that it was numbered, it sounded like it was all going to be done the same way, but if you look at it, it's actually two separate things. And so I just renumbered it to reflect what those were, because some of those things are done by ballot, some of them are done at the open floor town meeting, and so that was the only reason for that change. Not the substance, just the numbering.
Yep, perfect.
And I think that was, every time there was another one. So the quorum question, everybody puts a quorum into their charter. And the reason that I suggest that you perhaps not do one is that at least you've done a lower amount. I have one town that in their first charter required 100 people. And that was for everything they did, including the election piece of the town meeting. And they had the hardest time getting 100 people to do that piece. And I actually sometimes had a hard time getting 100 people to be at the town meeting itself. So if you want to have a quorum, that's fine, but I just wanted to point out to you that it's not absolutely required. And I did say that regardless of what you do, if you do want to keep a quorum, don't say that the quorum has to remain in place for the meeting to continue. The meeting, normally the rule for any meeting is if you have a quorum to start, you can continue the meeting even though that number drops down below. Now, with the zoning ordinance or something like that, you might also have a vote requirement. That doesn't go away. But with a town meeting, it's the people who are there who make the decisions. And so the concern is that sometimes people will come for one item and it's early in the agenda and then they leave and you might lose your quorum, and then you're going to have to set everything all up again for a continuation of the town meeting. So I do recommend against having the language, the quorum shall stand for the remainder of the business meeting, and all of that down to the end of that. As to the numbers, that's up to you.
Okay. So we go on to the next page, 2.2.2.
Yes. And that one, I thought the language, and maybe it just needs to be somewhat clarified, I thought that the language in this section was inconsistent with 2.1.2, which says the budget is an open floor vote item. And this talks about a ballot on certain issues related to the budget. And then I think there was also the, that no amount would be inserted in the article. You do have to insert an amount in the article that's required by state law. And depending upon whether you have whether you have capped warrant articles or whether you have uncapped warrant articles. An uncapped one, as you probably know, is the one that says what town, what amount to see what amount the town will appropriate, raise and appropriate for this purpose, and then the number gets set at the town meeting, but you do still have to have the recommendation of your select board, and if you have a budget board, also that. But if you do a capped article, it says to see if the town will vote to appropriate this amount of money for this purpose. And then at the town meeting, that number cannot be raised, but it can be lowered by amendment.
So your recommendation would be, it's inconsistent with 2.1?
Yeah, and to the extent that it relates to budget, and this does talk about budget committee and board, so that needs to be changed. And I think, first of all, you have to determine whether you can have a secret ballot article on a budget vote. A lot of times you will say that you can't, well, you can petition for anything because of the town meeting stuff, but I think that the issue is in secret ballot articles in the event of, I think that language needs to be struck.
Okay, so strike in secret ballot articles.
All the way down through town meeting, which was highlighted because that's where the comment.
Yeah.
And then the warrant signature is fine.
Okay. Any questions on that? Cindy, do you want to?
That whole section comes out.
Up to the signature part, yeah. Well, not the whole section, it comes out after, that first sentence, for initiated measures or referendum. That's gonna stay in after the word proposals, though. The rest of that comes out, and then that last sentence stays as is.
And the stuff that you highlighted on 2.2.5, elections and duties, in duties,
Yeah.
should be inserted.
Yeah, and I had some additional language right above it, but I didn't think that would be controversial.
Oh, in the, okay, I see that.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, move on?
Yep.
So on to page 8, we had,
Yes, you said that it will be held during the week of the general municipal, this 2.2.7,
yeah,
that it would be held during the week of the general election in March. And I pointed out to you that there's not an annual state or federal election date for, at least for March. And so you need to state the date that this is going to happen. You know, whether it's going to be the second Saturday in March or...
okay. And then on to 2.3.2.
We had 2.2.8. Oh, that was just changing the order of the language. So that's fine. Okay, so 2.3.2.
30 AMSI.
You have to say what number you want, because the statute says it's between 25 and 100. And I think what you've said here is that the use of nomination paper shall be in accordance with the state statute, which is fine, but I think you need to say how many signatures somebody has to have to be nominated, anywhere between 25 and 100.
Okay. Let's see. So 3.1.3.
Yes. I think the only problem here is that the election will be held, that's fine. It says that the term runs in accordance with the town's operating fiscal year, and your operating fiscal year does not start then. It starts on July 1st. July 1st? Yeah, July 1st. some towns actually start on January 1, but most start on July 1st. And so it should, so the terms normally do start right after the town meeting. So it just needs to say that. And I think what you do is strike with the town's operating fiscal year, in accordance with the town's operating fiscal year.
Okay. They do have staggered terms already.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think you really, you can just, you could probably leave that language as is. It's not gonna hurt anything to have that language in there. And, you know, the key is the last sentence, which says if you're serving now, you get to continue to serve the rest of your term
Right.
until election comes. I think that's okay to leave as is, as long as you take out the fiscal year thing.
Okay. So page 10,
Page,
3.4.
Yes.
3.4.1.
yeah, and I was not quite sure what you were meaning by that. Because it says, any other special town meeting, and the responsibilities of the will, actually, I had a discussion with you about that, and I think you're going to define the term will of the people, and if you're going to do that, I'm fine with it. And I believe what you said was, it's the votes, it's the, but if you have a definition for it,
I think-
I'm fine with any term as long as it's defined.
I think we,
I think you were going to put it in
right,
when we had the discussion, whether it's in there yet, I don't know, but it will be.
yeah. No, I think we wrote it up, but we didn't.
Okay.
I got it in here now.
Yep.
And then there's some small,
Yeah, 3.4.2C5 is just moving the language around a
for
little
revisions of Title 30.
bit. Yeah.
And then there's some, as we move down,
Yeah.
3.5.
3.5, that was, let's see, following enumerated powers by law to the board or at special town meeting. Yeah, I guess I didn't quite know, I think the powers and responsibilities granted by law to the board include those that are done at a town meeting. I don't have a problem with the phrase or elsewhere provided in the charter,
Okay.
so I just take out or at special town meeting.
And general assistants, overseers,
Yeah, and I did take out and interpret ordinances as provided in the charter because, well, it does say except for zoning ordinances. Except for zoning ordinances acted by initiative. I will say I found that to be a little bit confusing, and it might have just been the order of the language as opposed to, and maybe it could say propose ordinances as provided in this charter, except for zoning ordinances and ordinances enacted by initiative. I think that would be clearer to me, because when I read it a couple times, and I was having a little trouble with it.
So how would you phrase that?
I would just flip it around so, so that it would say, propose and interpret ordinances as provided in this charter, except for zoning ordinances and ordinances enacted by initiative.
Okay.
I think that gets you where you want it to be, but I find that, I may be the only one, I think that's a little bit less confusing, because when I was reading it, I turn myself around in circles sometimes when I read these things,
Mhm.
but I also think that's what somebody else is going to do, so, or at least another lawyer will.
On to page 11.
Yeah, they just turn municipal officers into board, that should be the term they use consistently here. Even though the municipal officers are the board, it's just good to use one term consistently. And I think 3.6.1, you might have still been working on that, but obviously that wasn't complete, so. And I know you do want to have some language in there about not being able to be a town employee if you're a member of the board, and that's fine. You can certainly can and should put that in there. But you'll just need to provide me with the language, and I'll review that when it's ready.
Yep. Okay.
And by the way, I did want to compliment you all on this. I think you've done a really great job with this. I mean, you had nothing when you started. Look at what you've got. It's really good. Okay, forfeitures of office, yeah, that was fine. That's fine. Those were just some suggested strike-throughs. In 3.9, I took out, I know life limited property is a common term, but I think it's better to use the term public health rather than limb.
And you're at.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm already down to 3.9, because the rest of these things are just completing sentences.
Public health.
Yeah.
Okay, I see it, yeah. On page 13.
Okay, page 13, I
I
think the
remem-
first
you
thing I
remem-
had was
you
in
remember.
3.11. Yeah, I
You
remember, it
remember
didn't have a number.
Yeah, 3.9.2.
Yeah, didn't have a number,
And
so it just,
3.11.
3.11 was just an order as authority, blah, 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 conferred by the board to perform a specified, yeah, that's, I just changed the order of the language, that's all. And that's why I didn't put a note next to it. So, I think that was that on that page.
And on page 14.
Yeah, at the beginning of it, well, now this one, I knew there would be at least one, and I will not be able to remember why I said that.
So this is emergency ordinances.
Right. And that talks about an emergency ordinance. Well, I'm all baffled myself. Every emergency ordinance will automatically be released. Must terminate sooner than approved by town meeting vote. Well, let's leave that there for now, since I'm not.
Yeah. 3.12.1.
Well, okay, that's probably where the comment was supposed to go, was there, because this talks about codification and review, but section 3.12 is emergency ordinances. And codification and review is all ordinances, it's not just emergency ordinances. So I think that probably should be in either 3.11 or a separate I think what you need to do is pull the emergency ordinance thing out of 3.12 and maybe give it its own section, 3.13.
Okay,
And that's probably what that comment meant. The comment was
So
not very
put it
clear
in-
at all.
put
Put
it-
that into
So-
3.
so that would be E on that, in that whole paragraph?
I think what you would do is, well, you want emergency ordinances to have its own caption.
Yeah.
But you've got 3.11, which is ordinances, orders, resolutions, and policies. I think that 3.12.1 probably, and 3.12.2 probably should go with 3.11, because they all relate to ordinances. And maybe just, and then leave 3.12 as 3.12, but move 3.12.1, 3.12.2, and what's currently 3.15 should probably be in 3.12 as well, or 3.11. So 3.11, 3.11, and 3.11 for those three. So I think all of these you should consider grouping back into, so codification and review, proposals for new modifications or revocation, hearings, adoption, legal review, those should all go, I think those should all go into 3.11. I suggest that the commission take a look at that and see how you want to organize it, but then emergency ordinances should probably be 3.12. It's just that all this other stuff should go ahead of it.
So you're gonna,
I'll leave you with this one.
okay,
so-
all right. Yeah, I've written on everything else but that one.
Yeah. And then, your numbering is off at that point, it kind of was anyway, because you didn't have 3.13 or 3.14. You guys can fix that, that's not a
Right.
problem. And I didn't see any issues with any of these other things listed here, so.
Okay.
The town manager provision was fine. And I just had that question for you in 4.2.2, about establishing the specific names of the departments in the charter, which means you have to amend the charter to not have those departments. And often, you might want to do that, and that would be fine, but often it says that the town manager will establish the departments, or the select board will establish, or the town manager and the select board will establish the departments. That's up to you. The one thing that you will need to have is town clerk provisions, but the other ones you don't necessarily have to have. Even code is required by state law, but you don't necessarily have to have it in your charter.
So if we were to leave this in here, this is exactly what's being done right now.
Okay, you could do that.
No, this is exactly what's being done right now.
And I guess my question would be, have you met with the select board? And that's, you and I had talked a little bit before the meeting about getting things out to the public. Another thing I recommend is that you invite the select board to one of your meetings.
We did.
And you did, okay, okay, and they didn't have any comments about this.
Not that I recall.
Then that's fine, that's fine. It was a question, it was not a,
No,
not a suggestion on my part.
No, I didn't.
I mean, looking at these things, I would say it's hard to imagine that you would not keep every single one of these departments in one format or another.
I think when it was discussed and when it was put in place like this, it was to show people how each department ran. It wasn't to show there was a boss or anything. I was more of a transparency on how each one runs, because there might be some people that don't really know how the structure of a department is. And certainly a small town, might be even one or two people. Public Works being one, Fire Department being one that has a little bit more people, and then in the municipal office.
Yeah, as long as everybody is clear that there might be situations where some of these departments are put together. So for example, a very common one would be town clerk and freedom of access. And sometimes somebody else who's in another position might also be the general assistance officer. So as long as everybody is clear that those kinds of things can happen, but all of these functions are going to be functions, because they all are. I mean, several of these are required by state law. In addition to being smart things to do, you've got to have an ACO, you've got to have a freedom of access officer. So I'm okay with leaving it that way. I just wanted to make sure that you felt comfortable with what you had listed.
So would a disclaimer be in order for when this is put in, when and if this gets voted on, and it's in the affirmative, to give that town manager the ability to be able to merge if necessary?
Well, let me look at town managers.
Did we have something like that in there already?
I think it was under the town manager, right?
Yes, I thought we did, yeah, set up the town manager could have changed.
I'm looking at that. It does say all, in 4.2.1, it does say all departments are under the direct supervision. The town manager, with the assistance of the department heads, will prepare the town organization document for approval by the board. Each department. If you're okay with that, I don't see a problem. I just wanted to make sure everybody was comfortable with it. I do know that I was talking with another town recently that had combined two roles, and somebody was quite upset that it was done because that's not what the charter said, according to him. And I didn't agree with him. I felt that they could do it as long as both of the roles were being filled, but they could be filled by one person.
So looking at this, the structure of government, looking at that statement, 4.2.1, shall be organized into departments, boards, committees, and commissions. It's under the town manager, so the town manager is the authority to be able to do that, with the assistance of each department head. And I'm sure that if this is passed and a town manager does appear, that it will take a few months for him to get a lay of the land, and then make recommendations of maybe streamlining or doing things necessary to make things function properly.
That all sounds fine.
Right?
Yep.
Your thoughts?
And I think you had said, should we say something in the report? And I think you can say it's not the intent of the commission that this would be read to set all of these departments in stone, but these are the functions of the government, under the decisions of the town manager and the select board as to various, as to the details. I think that's probably a good thing to put in there. Let's see.
I think there was just on 4.2.5.
Yes, and that was just of the main revised statutes.
And I think that was it. On to page 20. I think you left that one completely alone. Thank you.
I am not going to touch a code of ethics. That is up to you. Let's see, personnel policy. Yeah, that's fine too.
Yeah, I think you just
Has to
had,
have all that
you
stuff
had,
anyway, so.
vacancies on 5.1.2. You had some, just
Yeah, 5.1.1.
appointments.
Yeah, that's just to add that in there,
Yeah.
and the same with vacancies.
Good.
To make it a complete sentence.
Yes. Okay, so on to page 22.
Yeah, I got a typo in my own stuff, sorry about that. So 2.1.2 says ordinances proposed by initiative and referendum are subject to a ballot vote. Other petitions for warrant articles, which, as you know, for a town meeting form of government is a little bit different than a town council form of government, because there's a statutory provision that says you can file a petition to get. So if somebody wanted to, say, establish a skate park, they'd start a petition to require that a skate park be established. Hopefully identifying a funding source, appropriating funds for it as well. But that's a little bit different from an ordinance proposed by initiative and referendum. I think those should be done by ballot vote. And so, oh, I see. Because you said that they get to choose what they want, I don't think that they should be checking what they want. I think that you've already established that if something is an ordinance, if it's an initiated ordinance, I think you said earlier back in Article 2, that those would be done by secret ballot vote, and I think you leave it that way. And if it's not an ordinance, then it'll be done on the open floor. And that's how it normally would be done anyway. Whether it's a petition or whether it's something the select board puts on, it's usually done on the open floor. So I think you just want to take out
These three?
those options.
Okay.
And the language beneath it that says they'll check one of the options in the presence of the town clerk. So all that highlighted language I think should come out.
So even the petition must be signed?
No, I'm sorry, just this stuff that
Those
has
three
the
things. Oh,
highlight.
yeah.
Not must be signed, no, it does,
Yeah.
that needs to be there.
Right. Okay, and then there's just some,
Just some additional language to clarify.
everybody else set, Dennis?
Yes, all set.
So, page,
Yeah, and I did add to the best of my knowledge, because that's a difficult, it's difficult to hold somebody, they frequently think somebody is a voter and they might have moved and the person doesn't tell them. Well, to the best of that person's knowledge, they'll be disqualified by the clerk because they're not, but because it can have criminal implications if you make a false statement under oath, we want to be careful that we're not holding somebody to an impossible standard.
and you had on 6.2,
Yep.
do you want to establish a period of time in which the deficiencies must be addressed and resubmitted, or just leave it open as written?
Yes, because as it's written right now, if there's not a sufficient number, the town clerk certifies the result, sets it forth in the certificate, the particulars in which it is defective, and it shall at once notify the circulator of the petition as to the findings. It does not say that if it's determined to be ineffective, that either the petition becomes null and void, which would mean somebody would have to start all over again, or whether the person is given, a lot of charters will give somebody a short period of time in which to correct the deficiency, which usually is not enough signatures. And often not enough signatures because people signed who shouldn't have signed. So you can give them an additional 10 days to correct the identified deficiencies, but you do want to say if after the end of whatever periods you determine whether that means that the petition will then be considered null and void.
Mhm.
Remembering always that that doesn't mean you can't go start another one.
Mhm.
You can always go start another one, but you probably want to do that so that the clerk doesn't have to keep going through the same thing over and over again.
So,
And the time periods, that's all up to you as to exactly how you want to do it, but it's just an
Mhm.
issue that does need to be addressed with a little bit more detail.
and I think the last time, the one you put there, 7.2 at the end, Board may-
7.2. Oh, yeah, that's from state statute. They can do that anyway, so I thought it'd just be best to recognize
Mhm.
that.
so I think you pretty much left that alone on page 24.
I'm not touching your budgets.
Thank you again. And then just on page 25, unassigned fund balance.
That's the correct term for it.
Yeah. And there's a typo there.
But I don't have a problem with you putting surplus account after that, because that's how most people think of it.
Okay. Just some word changes, that's all.
Yes.
As you went down to
Yes.
7.7.2.
No immediate changes.
Yep. And on to page 26, with just a few,
Yeah, I think that the bonds was just a change in the numbering, since it didn't really relate to borrowing and investment.
so struck out 7.10, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Struck. And, yep,
And then in the amount and form satisfactory to the board, I don't think that's controversial either. Frequently, what happens with these is that the town the town pays for the bonds anyway, so
Yeah.
it should be in a form. But somebody could come in and say, I've got my own bond and this is where it's from, and we want the select board to be able to say, that's not okay with us. We'll get you the bond,
Mhm.
so.
Page 27, we're down, I think, 8.2
Yeah,
at the bottom.
yeah.
Should you establish a period of time in which the signatures have been submitted?
Yeah, your recall, there's a couple of things in here, and they don't have to be in here. It's just that in some towns, you can't have a petition for recall that is filed within the first, say, 6 months, or within the last 6 months of a person's term, and obviously, the last 6 months is for obvious reasons, because they're gonna be up for re-election anyway, and it just pushes forward the vote. But the other question is, can somebody just be running one of these things the whole time that somebody's in office, and they bring it in from time to time, and the clerk says, no, you don't have enough signatures, and then they go out and they get more? Or do they have to bring in the requisite number of signatures within a certain period of time, and if they don't have it, then they have to start over again. Again, I think that's something you want to talk about with the larger commission and decide what you want for it. There's not one right or wrong, there's no really wrong answer, but it would be better to have a little bit more certainty about that, because as you know, the recalls can be quite divisive, and so you don't necessarily want to have what I refer to as the evergreen petition that just keeps running the whole time somebody's in office.
And the last one,
The last one is,
at the end of the petition process, will there be a period for the petitioner?
yeah, this is similar to the one that was for the prior one. What often happens, this says if it's found insufficient, it's going to be filed. Well, if it's found insufficient, the petition will be filed, and the voter who filed the petition will be promptly notified. If they don't have enough signatures, will they be given a period of time to get the additional signatures? And with this one, you don't have to do that. It's just a question. A lot of places do it, and other places don't do it. You've got to do it. This ties in with some of the things I talked about under 8.2. And so, really, I just think you want to have a somewhat broader discussion about how are we going to have recall work? Are we going to place more restrictions, not really restrictions on it, but more parameters on it, about timeframes, about submitting signatures once you get the petition, exactly how is that going to work? You've got the basics here, and certainly the election stuff, the election piece and all of that, that's good. Until we get to the point of, you are going to have to determine whether the position, the election to fill a recalled position is going to happen at the same election, or if it's going to be held at a later special election. And that is completely a policy determination for you to make. The charters go both ways on that. And of course, obviously, one of the concerns is some towns have it at the same meeting. And the concern is that, well, if you do that, that can be confusing to people because they think that it's open, and so they just vote to recall the person and they vote for somebody else. And in other places, there's a period of time in between, although in some other places they've said, well, we don't want there to be a long period of time in between. We want the positions to be filled right away. So you just need to decide which of those two things it's going to be. Usually the election would be held within 60 days or so of if the person is recalled, there'd be an election. And did you say whether the person can, I think you said the person can't run again.
Right. Right, so there's no person.
Yeah, that's fine, you can do that. But I would say that it's one thing to say they can't run for the same office again. It's another thing to say they can't be appointed to any board or commission or committee, and they can't be hired to a town office, because, you know, the recall, it doesn't have to be for any specific reason. And so it's not, it seems to me that you want to perhaps allow people to make decisions as to whether somebody can, you know, you're recalled from the select board. Well, or actually you're recalled, I guess you can be recalled from the planning board because the planning board's elected. You're recalled from the planning board. Well, what if you want to serve on, let's say there's a parks committee and you want to serve on that? But you can't. You can't for 2 years. So I'd look again at what you can't do for 2 years afterwards. I think if you want to say you can't run for office for 2 years afterwards, I think that's fine. I mean, you were recalled from office, so you shouldn't be able to run. 2 years is on the longer end of what I've seen, but it can be it can be that period. But I would look again about appointments as opposed to running again for office, and also hiring for a town office.
Good.
Because read that way, it would mean that you couldn't become a volunteer firefighter because they get paid.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm not sure they're called volunteers anymore. It might be
No.
called per diems.
30%.
Okay, so the next one.
This was
Oh, the periodic review. Every charter commission puts this in, and every time I say, do you really want to do that? So what I believe I've suggested is, did I suggest this? Yeah, is that you, if you want to have a one-time required revision, that's fine. But remember that the Charter Commission can take up to 2 years to do its work. And you've talked about having it every 5 years, starting at the time of enactment of the first 3-year version. So there is going to be a Charter Commission established. I think if you want to have one within a period of time, because this is your first one and there's some concern that you might need to have another one, remember, first of all, that at any point in time, 6 months after you're done and this gets put into place, citizens can ask for a new charter commission. The select board can put out to vote having a new charter commission at any time under state law, and amendments are possible to the charter. All of them require the vote of the citizens of the town. They can be initiated by the citizens, or it can be initiated by the select board. So you have these abilities to do these things, but if you're concerned that, look, we really do think that somebody needs to sit down and be reviewing this formally within some period of time after the initial enactment, just because it is new, that's fine. But I would recommend against requiring it then for any period of time, and that after that first review, that what you say is at least once every 10 years or at least once every 5 years, the select board will review the charter and determine whether it believes that revisions or amendments are necessary. I just wrote this language for somebody else.
Okay.
Just because, as I said, you will find after the first review of it, that people are not going to be that interested in it. If it's working okay,
Mhm.
you'll have a hard time getting a good group of people to come in and work on it for another year or two. And granted, you don't have to spend a full 2 years on it if there aren't problems, but you still have to do all of that and do the report, all of that stuff. It's a lot, as you all know, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of meetings. So you can talk about that, and again, if you want to have one mandatory revision period, then absolutely do that, but then after that, have it subject to the select board. And after you talk about it, if you need some help with the language on that, as I said, I just drafted something for somebody else that's similar to that. I don't think they're going to do it, but there you have it.
And what would be the reason why they wouldn't want to do it?
Well, what happens is, after the charter gets enacted, initially there'll be some things that you have problems with, and amendments will get done to address those issues. Then at that point, there's not this need to do a charter commission to look at everything over again, because even the charter commission can actually come back and say, no, we're not proposing any changes to it, we think it's fine as is.
Mhm.
That could happen. I don't think it would, but, or they come back with some pretty minor stuff. That's all stuff that could have been done through amendment without going through the whole vote for a charter commission. The charter
Mhm.
commission has to meet, the charter commission has to issue the formal reports, has to hold the public hearings, as opposed to the select board getting a petition from the citizens or initiating on its own proposed single subject amendments to the charter to make any fixes to it. So it's just, I will tell you that I have 2 towns with the mandatory review processes, and both of them are looking at taking it out of their charters because they've had problems. And they're both on their second mandatory reviews, and this is really when it comes up is in the second mandatory review.
Okay. So what we have in here is pretty much what's being done in town government right now.
As to,
How it functions. It's been put in this document.
yes, I think the change that you have is that you're creating a town manager position. But everything else you're putting down in here, I think it's really helpful. I think, I know that there was a strong desire to have a charter in the town. I personally think charters are helpful, especially as towns get a little bit larger than they have been in the past. I've already said to you, I think it's a very good document, very well organized, and I think it's very clear. My comments are just to try to clarify things a little bit more and clean up anything that's inconsistent. So, you're in great shape for when you started. I'm very impressed by this.
Well, there's been a lot of work by the members, and some members are not here tonight.
It shows.
So there's been a lot of deliberation and a lot of comments back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
I think that everybody's worked together extremely well, and I'm proud to be part of it. So.
I think everybody should be very proud of it.
Do we have any questions for Natalie while she's here?
That's on here.
Yeah.
Now, I know everybody likes these flow charts. Are you gonna,
Well, we've
will
done,
that be in your report as opposed to part of your charter?
we don't want to be part of it, we want to put it in the report.
Yeah. That's
So
what makes
we have
sense.
another template that was done on, some other stuff.
I think I've seen that.
It's really well done. You have one there, Jimmy? I think we handed out last week, the one we couldn't get to print. Because it was too extensive.
Oh, I haven't seen
It was really well done.
that. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
So it kind of, it goes along with how the town departments were broken down. And so it kind of gives a transparent look at that so people can follow it.
Yeah, that's the kind of information that's really helpful in your final report. Because the people who are interested in town government have a pretty good sense of how it works, but you're reaching out to people who maybe have not been terribly involved in that kind of stuff, but are going to be interested in this and are going to say, well, I don't understand how that works. So anything you can give them that shows them how it works is great.
Questions, Dennis?
No? Good.
Joanne, anything?
Okay.
Well, this has been very helpful. I know you and I have talked
Yes.
on these things here. And I certainly, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to go through that. And you spent a little bit of time on that, deliberative, looking through that.
Well, you can appreciate that this is some of the more interesting work that I get to do. Town governance is, I mean, obviously, we all have a passion for that, or we wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah. So, can we take a little short break, and we will come back on? into some of the things that need to be changed. So the committee, the commission is gonna be, the members of the commission are gonna be working diligently over the next week or so to make those changes and come with a clean document. So that being said, we need to schedule our next two meetings, and as May 9th and the 23rd work for everyone? And the 9th, we can take a look at the document that's been cleaned up, go down through those changes and get any clarifications that we might need. And then on the 23rd, we'll do a final, whatever we need to correct from the 9th to the 23rd, we'll go over that. And then that'll give us enough time to be able to publish a preliminary report and the document up on the website, advertise for a public hearing, and have the public hearing on June 13th. And all of those are on Thursday nights.
7 PM for all of them?
7 PM for all. So I think that is the agenda for tonight. If there is no final comments or any concerns, I will initiate a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor? Thank you very much. Good night.